Yo, let's go. What's up, y'all? Tonight we're covering Snow Crash, 1992 novel by Neal Stephenson. This one, this one is wild, y'all. Uh, Another wild one. So hope everybody's doing all right tonight. And let's turn that on. Okay, so yeah, so hope everybody's doing tonight all right. And I don't know, you probably can't see, but I finally got that damn tooth out. It's the last time I have to ever mention it. People watching probably going, man, won't he shut up about that, babbling on about that? But yeah, I went in there. She said, oh, this thing has got to go. So I got that out. But feeling fine, and I thought it would be a good thing to take my mind off it and take everybody's mind off of whatever's going on in the world right now by covering this dystopian novel. And it's this is an interesting one. This is a kind of a departure for us because this one is more, I don't know, more up to date than I don't want to say more up to date than things we've done in the recent past, but it's certainly my thesis statement for this novel is essentially that this is a manual for the present, and this is now. It's supposed to be kind of a, I suppose, kind of an alt future in the sometime in the 21st century, but this is now. And so let me give you a little bit of background about what this novel's about. So 1992, Neal Stephenson. So first off, I'll just state that if you've never heard of this book, it's pretty interesting. This might be pretty revelatory for a lot of people because the book is not only about the metaverse, it is the metaverse in terms of it names the metaverse. It takes place in, again, in the 21st century and really now. And it's interesting because it's kind of the way that the book is written, it's kind of a 90s, early 90s version of now, of the way things would be in the future, which is now. And it's really unbelievable because, I think back to 1992 when I was 12 years old, and I didn't know what the internet was. I think I've told you before. I mean, we're on the internet now, and that's great. But back then, I didn't know what the internet was. I remember going to a friend's house in like 1994, and he pulled up. I remember that was the first time that I like saw the internet. I think it was about 94. And I remember that the first website we went to was mtv.com, triple dubs, mtv.com. And we went there, and it took 3 hours to load. And so we gave it a few minutes, and I was like, oh, this sucks, And then, AOL came along, and there was, AIM and AOL Instant Messenger and stuff like that. But it was just an extra thing. It was just kind of cool to, be talking to the people that I would already normally talk to, on the phone, on the landline. And I had a Motorola. I had a 1996 Atlanta Olympics Richard Jewell special edition Motorola cell phone. And then I think I told you that when I went off to university in Northern Ireland my second year, which was 2000, I went there in August or September of 2000. And when you were getting all your stuff at the students union, you got a free BT cell phone, a mobile phone, BT mobile phone, and it had texting on it. You could text. And then I remember I came back for a break, and I told my friends, oh, there's a thing called texting, and they were like, "What? What is that?" And I thought honestly at the time it would never catch on. Everybody would just be calling each other on the phone, and that's kind of the way it went for a while. And then you had the little phone, like when the Matrix, the Matrix had already come out at that point. But remember the phone, that little thing comes down, and then you had the clamshell. But before you had that, you had the Nokia phones and all that, and then texting. Texting was way bigger in the UK than it was in America for a long time, and then finally it caught on. And then the internet. I mean, of course you use the internet in college and stuff like that. But again, it was just like, I don't know. even like in 2007, I remember being like, somebody said, they'll send me an email. And I was like, nah, if it's important, you'll send me you'll put a letter in my box, or you'll send me I don't know. It was like just an extra thing. And now it's the whole world. And it's crazy to think, I know you might think that's a slow boy opinion, but that's the way it was. I just thought the internet's for nerds or whatever. And now, looking back at this novel, I can't believe it was written in 1992. On the one hand, I can't believe it. On the other hand, it's not really a predictive novel so much as it functions kind of as a manual, because there's so much. The book gave us a number of terms, and there's so much about it that is current, present, and relevant now. Not only relevant, but it's like the way things work now. And the thing I was most struck by with this book is not not the story or the plot or the events, but more the general atmosphere, the ambiance, and specifically the language. The language is a kind of it's a techno-novel, unlike anything that I've read, because it really gets what we're doing here. It gets the names of groups, it gets the names of people, it gets the lingo, it gets even the way that the words are spelled, and it's this whole. Nate, shouts out to Natesky. Natesky made a good point when he mentioned to me that that like Stephenson really, he's great at world building, but in my opinion, at times, I don't want to speak for Natesky, but I think he was getting at this, that the novel gets bogged down in the world building itself, because there's so much, it's so disparate, and that I realized is purposeful, because that's why it's a maximalist novel. So my thesis statement for the book is essentially, again, that it sort of functions as a manual for the way the internet has sort of joined seamlessly with IRL, and it's amazing. It really is amazing. I've got a list of terms here that I'm going to read in a minute, but there's so much to it, and it reminded me a lot of there are numerous literary allusions within the book. You can see why the book hasn't been filmed yet, because it's another one of these novels that it's a baroque novel. There's so much detail in it that on the one hand it would make it easy to film. On the other hand, it seems like expensive, not in terms of dollars, but expensive in terms of why make a movie when this is already real life, right? But it did remind me of one of the next books I'm going to cover, which is Don DeLeo's White Noise. I finally got a copy. I had two other copies that I couldn't find, so I finally was able to get another copy, and that's thanks to your support out there. I ordered Don DeLeo's White Noise, which again is a postmodern novel, different from Snow Crash, but the language, the way that the author uses language in the book is similar. And then, of course, the next thing that I'm going to cover, the very next thing I'm going to cover, is Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men, and that is thanks to our homeboy Jethro out there, my main homeboy, who has sponsored a stream and asked for a Coen Brothers stream. So because we are Bay's Lit Analyzer, right, because we are, shouts out to all the basement analyzers out there, because we are the basement breathalyzer channel, we ground everything that we do here in literature, in text. We've done that since the beginning. We're going to continue to do that. And yes, we may cover films, but as long as they are films grounded in literature, that is the purpose here. So we'll be covering the Coen Brothers' No Country for Old Men, and I will be comparing it to Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men. Put it in your pocket. Put it in your pocket. Shouts out to OK lurking out there. Shouts out to Bay's Homeschool Mom. Shouts out to Jethro, Natesky, William Kane, Kim. Shouts out to Ellie, Mixkey, Jared, Exposing Powerful Lies. All my homeboys out there. Shouts out to JD over at Jay's Analysis, who just announced that he is doing another meetup. This one's going to be, I think, September 3rd in Orlando. So, of course, we're going to try and make that. Shouts out to Cotel, who's also doing a meetup in Florida, Church of the Eternal Logos. And shouts out to Tristan Haggard. and to the Green Feathers. And please go to the Green Feathers channel and watch Emily's amazing stream earlier tonight analyzing Vincent van Gogh and his art. And I did not know about the Japanese influences, how heavily Japanese art influenced Vincent van Gogh. So I thought that was pretty enlightening. That's very good. Yeah, shouts out to the basement breathalyzers out there. Shouts out to Kristen, Soyboy Whiteboard, all my friends out there. So again, tonight we're doing Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. And again, this is kind of an unusual work, literary work for us to cover, but why not? You know, because we're not just covering literature, we're covering literature which is not only relevant, I mean, great literature we've talked about in the canon of literature lives and breathes, right? And we can deduce the worldview of the speaker in these various works and decode the works and discuss in comparison to our own worldview. And this one is certainly, there is certainly a worldview in this book. I mean, it's crazy. And I don't want to say that necessarily that I enjoyed the book. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it, but I have some critiques of the novel. But again, I think that I found a nice balance with this one because I think that my critique of the book is one that the author intended purposefully. And what I mean by that is, again, that it is a book of it is a novel of maximalism. By the way, you can contact me, and if you want to sponsor a stream, if you want me to dedicate some hardcore work to a particular topic or work, one that, of course, that I find suitable for the channel, please contact me at madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com, or you can DM me on Instagram, and please drop those fat kongbucks, gipperbucks, and what else is it? Mises dollars is in the book. Please drop some fat kongbucks to us here. They got to be fat for me to do a sponsored stream. And of course, if you want to give me a shout out or have anything read on right here, or give you a shout out or give somebody a shout out, please think about supporting me. And again, thank you again to everybody who supported me big time, because I was finally able to get that damn tooth removed. And again, and she said, wow, this thing has got to go. I'm not going to describe it because it's pretty gnarly, but thankfully it's out. And look, see, I'm such a Marine, can stand anything. You know, I'm being so alpha Chad tonight, you guys. Look at me, I'm here. I'm just kidding. No, but I find this therapeutic to be here with you guys and to discuss some literature. And you know, yep, got a pain in my mouth, and maybe you can't even see it. You can probably hear it, but whatever. We're gonna keep going, you guys, and hopefully you'll find this enjoyable, and hopefully my voice isn't too weird, because the thing, I don't know, who gives a shit, right? I'm just gonna keep going. So first of all, what is Snow Crash about? Well, it's about a character. It's really about the metaverse, and that's not an interpretation. It is literally about the metaverse. He names it the metaverse in 1992. This is a virtual world, which is obviously similar to, you know, you got to jack into the virtual world, just like in, you know, The Matrix or in Ready Player One. I saw Kim's comment about, she's talked about Ready Player One so many times in the past few weeks. I mean, yeah, these things are relevant, right? And it also makes me think of, there are a few movies that have come out that, one is underrated, I think, is the movie Nerve, which I had up there earlier, which is basically, you know, basically IRL live streaming as a game. It's sort of like the Hunger Games, but it's set, you know, in the Cube City, right? It's set in New York, but this novel certainly has the ISO cubes and the Cube City and pod life and all of that stuff. It's got all this. It's even got, did you know that it's even got Ortho Bros in the book? They are one of the sort of, I guess, you know, groups. They're one of the online groups that emerges. I mean, it's got everything. It's got Ortho Bros, schizoids. It's got fembots. It's got narcolombians. It's got burbclaves. I mean, I love the language in it. It's pretty funny. And some academics and scholars have talked about how the book is a satire. It is not a satire. It is straight up. Neal Stephenson works for what is it? Jeff Bezos's. Shouts out to Westlex Media for coining that term. Works for I think Jeff Bezos's Deep Blue project. He is a frequent consultant. Obviously, Zuckerbot loves this book, and it is a manual for Sill Valley Pod Life future world techno coon pod vision that I've never seen in a book before. So what happens is the protagonist, whose name, by the way, is literally hero protagonist. Okay, it's a little bit meta, but that's why it's the metaverse. Get it? His name is hero protagonist, Hiro, and he's sort of a, this is the world they live in is like now in a sense, right? It's like a conglomeration of all people everywhere. It's a total globalist world. And hero protagonist is oh boy, the novel starts out off with him as a pizza delivery driver, okay? And it's kind of, it reminded me of, it's like what's that movie? The Last Starfighter combined with Back to the Future. It's like he's driving around in this sort of Mad Max car, but it's more like a DeLorean. Is what I got was my impression of it. And there is a lot of Pizza, what I would interpret as Pizza GATE in this book. And it's not on the surface, but in terms of the larger context of the bad guys and the world in which they live, I think that is what is happening. Now, on the surface, anyone who's read the book is going to go, no, that's ridiculous, man. Because they will say, no, he's literally, this is about consumerism and the privatization of the world in terms of, even neighborhoods are like sort of private complexes with their own military grade protection. It's almost like an Elysium world. Or they will talk about how, one interpretation would be that, a lot of the lingo in the book is like, it's like the book was obviously not written last year. It was written in 1992. It's very 92. And I don't know how to describe that other than to say that, well, one thing is like, if you were there, man, in that special place and time, you would completely know what I'm talking about when you read this. A lot of the expressions and the emphasis on, consumer products is still around now, but it existed in a way which was sort of ironic and critical in 1992. This is a Generation X book. It's through and through. It's a Gen X statement about the future, and the future man has come to pass. And yes, there are things in it that you will go that, I guess a normie would look at this and they would go, no, man, those things don't exist. You can't do all this. And the metaverse is like 1.0. But even in the book, they talk about how there's a metaverse 1.0 and 2.0. And, it's sort of about internet version 322, right? Because, it's so high tech and yet, and it's sort of seamless with IRL, except for the fact that, Jay's gone into this in depth. It's like there's sort of two different like versions of the future in a way. One is this like sort of techno world that's like Tron, I guess, where everything is, high tech and futuristic. But the other version is that everything's high tech, futuristic, and there's body mods and there's, all this stuff, but it exists juxtaposed with the griminess of the dystopian future. Like, okay, so you remember in the movie Elysium? If you haven't seen Elysium, I would recommend you watch it. I think it's underrated. It's a pretty good movie. And it's the one with Matt Damon. It's directed by the South African guy that did District 9? Is that what it's called? District 9 and Chappie. And, those movies are about like, I remember District 9. Is it called that? Is it District 9 or 11? Anyway, illuminate, confirm. That movie is about like the you know, DARPA tech sort of um, masquerading as the fake and grays, right? And and they live in this sort of post-apocalyptic garbage Wall-E world. Well, it's the same thing in Elysium, right? Because Matt Damon works in L.A., garbage L.A., and everybody's homeless, everybody's like fighting for a scrap, and the elites live in the Milan-esque pentagram-shaped off-world, which is floating around the earth on their little gravitational, you know, elite, Jeff Stein Effrey island world in fake and gray space or whatever. And Matt Damon has to get up there, and he's got to take this woman up there who's a crosses over the BORDER. She's one of those people, and her daughter is sick, and of course they have the health pods like they do in Prometheus and Alien, right? She's got to get up there because her daughter's sick. Remember that kind of also happens in Star Trek Into Darkness, which Jay also covered, right? With my name is Khan. I am Khan with Benedict Cumberbatch. Anyway, and he's got to he sort of sells himself to the mafia, sort of Mexicali, Chicano gangster tech mafia in L.A., and they jack him up and load him up with body mods, and then he's got to fight this MK Delta dude who, by the way, wields a samurai sword just like in the book. So what happens in this is like it's kind of a it's a very 90s vision of the future where like you have skate punks and you've got cyberpunk cafe and they're wearing Chuck Taylors and stuff, and okay, those little details like have changed, but you can still interpret them to the way they are now. And gets in trouble, and he meets this girl named YT, which again I thought was interesting. It's obviously supposed to be YT like WHITEY, but I couldn't help but every time I looked at this girl's name think YT as in the thing that we're on right now. Hello? Basically, the novel focuses on like the world, the world building and hero. This guy, his name is Hero Protagonist. Again, meta. Jacks himself into, he connects to the metaverse. That's what he does for fun, just like in Ready Player One. And what they do is they go into the metaverse, and he's a hacker. He's a hacker who works for the CIC, which is the Central Intelligence something. It's like it's the successor to the CIA, and CIA is mentioned in the book, but it's like in this sort of post world, after the big one goes off, and the world has been sort of balkanized and then regrouped into this sort of libertarian WET dream of privatization, where everybody's sort of is responsible for themselves and owns themselves, but of course they're all under the major corporate overlords and the corporate hegemony of the elites. And the club that they go into is a black pyramid. So Illuminate confirming this. They go into the black pyramid, and of course it's missing the capstone, because the elites they have a managerial class which distances them, as a buffer, and distances them from the sort of plebs, and then there's a hierarchy amongst the plebs, and Hero Protagonist is at sort of the top of that, especially in the metaverse, because not only is he a hacker, but he also works for the CIC as a he calls it a dry works hacker. He's a dry works hacker. Of course, then he starts doing wet works later on in the book. But he's also the most formidable like fighter in the metaverse, and it's kind of like, I don't know. I've never played or looked at Fortnite or whatever, but I imagine that's what it's like. It's like world building Fortnite mixed with Skyrim and all this stuff that people talk about, right? And he's like the Raiden. I'm gonna give a '90s version of this. He's like, I'm a geriatric millennial, you guys. Okay, I think of myself as the Sophia from Golden Girls of the millennials, because I'm 1980. But I think of him as kind of a 1992 Mortal Kombat 2 Raiden character in this because he wields a katana and what's the other thing called uh, the short sword, the short samurai sword, and he's described. I mean, oh, that hurt. Oh, I just rubbed my face too hard. Oh, right where they took the tooth out. Damn, and they put about 100 stitches in there. Damn, that hurt. All right, if I start spitting blood, y'all, I'm not a psychic vampire. It's from that tooth, so forgive me. Oh man. Um. Anyway, he's like the most formidable samurai fighter in the metaverse. He's number one. And he's always fighting people. And then what happens is, of course, he's gonna start fighting people. He's gonna start fighting people, like in real life, right? And yeah, okay, brings up shouts out to OK the Kang that 80 is Gen X. Yeah, I mean, what's weird about this, in my opinion, obviously the generations are it's almost like a culture creation advertising thing to categorize everybody, man. It's almost like Bernays came up with this, directly. But it is true in a number of ways. I mean, but as generations go, but I think that what's interesting is that like my whole life I always thought of myself as Gen X, as Generation X, because that's like when I was 12 in 1992, that's all I ever heard, right? Was Generation X. And now in hindsight, I look at it and I go, well, actually, Generation X, yeah, I was around for all that stuff, and I was young, and I'm part of it. Is certainly ingrained, in terms of the culture and all that. But actually, the Generation X guys were like Nirvana on MTV. Who Kurt Cobain's like 1967, right? And I always thought of Generation X as like World War II through 1969 in a way. I mean, sorry, that's boomers, and then Gen X is like, you know, Gen X would be like 69 or somewhere like that to 1981, right? With Reagan's first term. So clearly, everything changed, right, in terms of generationally around 81, right? And then, but it's interesting because now look, in my life now, I think in terms culturally, not that this means anything to anybody. I'm just speaking for myself. It doesn't. I'm not. It doesn't mean anything. But I think of myself probably more having more of a I don't know. I relate more in terms of culturally maybe to millennials, like early millennials, like to talking born in the 80s, right? Certainly not to Zoomers, but shouts out to the Zoomers out there. Shouts out to the Zoomers, the Boomers, the greatest generation, Gen X, the Zennials. I mean, that's almost like we're talking in terms of subgroups within the snow crash world. I don't know. I don't know what any of that means, but I think that I think of myself as a Sophia character, not Sophia Luminate Confirmed, Sophia Golden Girls, okay, geriatric millennial, because it's like I don't know, I'm right on the cusp or whatever, right? I mean, like for instance, I think of Snapchat as like a millennial. I think of Snapchat as a millennial thing, TikTok is like a Zoomer thing, and not only do I not get TikTok at all and have nothing to do with it, and that's fine if you do, okay, but I just but Snapchat also like I don't know. You might think this is kind of boomer of me, but I just don't get it. I don't care. I just don't care. And I think that's probably more of a Generation X thing about me, that I just don't give a shit about stuff like that. But at the same time, I obviously, we're on the internet, and I like the internet, and I don't know if like is the right word. I'm sorry. I'm kind of babbling on now. Maybe it's the operation I had today. But but Flippy Hammond says Golden Dawn Girls. Yeah, Illuminate Confirm. But but back to my point. This is a Generation X view of the future, and it's one such that this obviously blatantly and even on the surface, and admittedly so, it influenced the internet, the interscape completely. Not only is the terminology used, but the way of thinking about it is so ingrained seamlessly with the way that things are now and with the way they are to come, that it's pretty interesting. I mean, the one thing that I will criticize about this, one of the things I'll criticize about the book is that it's great when it talks about sort of culture and society and, young society and all that. But it goes way off course when it delves into religion, especially religion and philosophy. And I just thought it was so low IQ at points. And I'm not sure if I don't know what to think about that. I don't know whether this is purposeful on the part of Neal Stephenson, the author, or whether this is sort of mimicking and almost a precursor for the argumentation that we see all the time. All of the arguments that you have seen where people are always trying to gotcha JD, right? With low IQ arguments are all in this book. It's incredible. And it's the other thing I'll criticize is the way the narrative is structured, in that I've talked so much about show versus tell. And obviously when you're world building like this, in a novel, it's like you have to do a fair amount of, you're obviously storytelling, right? But there is a way of writing which brings the reader into the narrative and makes them a part of it, where they're living it. When you're reading the book, that's the thing about reading this, when you're reading a great book, right? Is that you are living and breathing in this world. When you put the book down, you can imagine the entire world that that is depicted in the novel. But in this novel, there was so much telling. It was didactic in a way that I just, at times I went, I got it. I get it. Not everything has to be defined like someone is asking the question directly all the time. There doesn't have to be that much exposition. We can get it, right? We understand it. And maybe he wrote it like that purposefully because he knew that there would be a certain number, because it mimics the low IQ or just the base mentality, or the sort of schizoidism of non-focus, which is inherent in such a big thing as the internet. So I get that. But at times it just gets to be too much on the reader. And I don't know if you've read that, and if you've read the book and you feel the same way, put it in the comments below, please. Because I really am interested in what you guys think. If anyone out there, I know Natesky's read the book, or if anybody else out there has read the book, it's incredible, because I didn't even hear of this book until, I don't know, fairly recently, and then it was on my list for a while, and then I finally got into it. But it's pretty crazy that how not only relevant, but how much it holds a mirror. It holds a mirror up darkly to the world now. But I think, again, going back to my thesis statement, I think it creates that rather than mimics or mirrors that, which is interesting. So what happens is, basically, hero protagonist, the plot is sort of secondary to the atmosphere in this, again. And what happens is he fights somebody in the Black Pyramid, and then he meets the feds. I think it's YT. Her mother is a fed. He himself works for CIC, which is like CIA. And then he comes across this guy in the metaverse named Raven. And Raven's an interesting character because he's like the villain in the novel. But then he meets, when he's in the Black Pyramid, he meets this guy named David. And David, of course, yes, we get the biblical connotations of the name, but it also reminds me of David in Prometheus, right? The cyborg, the robot, the cyberpunk robot in this. And David is spelled DA5ID, so it mimics the dodging of the algorithm with his name. And what happens is he's hanging out in the Black Pyramid, which is like only for hackers and the elites and all these people. And all of a sudden, this demon, they're called demons, a demon sort of malware bot approaches him in the in the in the metaverse, in the Black Pyramid. I'm kind of truncating this a bunch of stuff into what, like, the key events, and says, "Hey man, you want to take this new drug?" And and they sort of pass it off as a drug, and in a way, it is a drug, but it's a hyper card, and he cracks open the hyper card, and then the basically the guy like opens a scroll, and it's like it's a bitmap, and it's all this data, and the data is like on a, data. I imagine it being on like a blue screen of death, and it just completely blitzes him. This is in the metaverse, and what happens is he experiences a snow crash, and a snow crash is like similar to, this is like computer lingo that I don't know, so forgive me if you know this, but it's similar to, like, on a boomer television when you have snow and static, but it's when there's an overload of data and the system crashes. And what happens with that is your avatar, and the book, did I mention that the book gives us the term avatar? I mean, avatar, of course, is, I think, a Hindu word, but which is religious in nature. But in the book, the avatar is, your online appearance for whatever you choose to be in the metaverse in, right? So it's an avatar like we think of it now, and it actually comes directly from the book. And so his avatar sort of crashes and he dies. And what happens when that occurs is, like, you never really die in the metaverse, so it's completely transhuman, and you sort of go into this like hell world, basement world, basement breathalyzers out there. You go into a basement world that hero protagonist has designed to allow your avatar to like go somewhere else, because otherwise it'll just sit there, and then you have to reboot the system and get back in. But when it happens, what the novel like sort of hinges upon is that David himself in real life also snow crashes. So he sort of, like short circuits and goes into a coma. And so the novel is focused on like figuring out, in a way, it's maneuvering through this gigantic landscape of the internet and, the metaverse. It's focused on like, what is this snow crash thing? Because it's a virus, and who did it and who is responsible. And spoiler alert, whatever, the guy who's responsible for it is this guy named, his name is, hold on, what's his name? Rife, L. Bob Rife. His name is L. Rob Rife. He is a mega elite, and he's obviously, his name is supposed to be a takeoff of L. Ron Hubbard. You get that right away. And he runs or funds this thing called, I think, Reverend Wayne's Pearly Gates. Okay, and now, what does this mean? Well, Reverend Wayne's Pearly Gates is essentially if Pastor Randy Balls took over the entire like concept of religion in America and the world, and like the strip mall, monster truck, slip and slide, church became the church. And now, in a way, you would think, that sounds pretty right, because pretty accurate, because we've talked about how even Harold Bloom called this the American religion, right? This sort of Gnostic Pentecostalism. And this is, that's it in the book. And then what happens is later on, they go to, is it Alaska? They go to Alaska and they meet the orthos. And this is interesting because the orthos are described in, there's like two, when they're describing the orthos, it's basically like the orthos or the ortho bros in the book are like basically the Eskimos and the Indians who were converted by the Russian Orthodox like years back, and became Orthodox, but then embraced this sort of Pentecostalism and split from the true Orthodox Church. And the true Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, is in the book, I think, I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong about this, but is essentially like the Orthodox Church. And these Pentecostal guys are kicked out because they're Pastor Randy Ball's guys now, right? And anyway, so they have their own sort of enclave and their own system, and they're all armed, and it's pretty cool. In one part, it talks about how, like, they are completely like impervious to the wiles of the thought bots, because they are like, they're vol cells because of a religious devotion. It has nothing to, they're actually mystical. They're impervious to it, and they are devoted. But they're also all armed. And then what happens is Raven, the bad guy, I guess the villain in the novel, even though everybody's kind of, I don't know, whatever, but Raven, like, is this ultimate they describe him as like the ultimate badass because he carries around a hydrogen bomb. He has an H bomb. And one of the things is, like, you don't know whether he actually has it or not, but he has like a dead man switch, right? And then they gotta find this guy Bob Reif, and then at the end of the novel, he gets attacked by a DARPA-dog that was protecting YT earlier in the book, and the jet goes down Big Nine style, and then it's over and they all go home. Now, that sounds like, that's probably like the worst. If you've read it and you're like, oh, Snow Crash is the most amazing book, forgive me, okay? Because, there's a lot to this, okay? And I'm a newbie with all this, all the lingo, damn lingo in this book. I did the best. I think I did a pretty good job for not being one of these people. But that's like my sort of summary of the plot. But again, like, the plot is not really what's important, because the plot is secondary to the world itself. And the point, to Stevenson's credit, like, the point is that everyone is involved in the world, in the metaverse, right? It's not, all the factions are sort of playing off against one another. And it's like, there's not so much like an idea in the book of virtue and vice. It's just kind of like existing and being there and knowing how to do things or not. And that's because the book hinges on, this is like really Westworld-esque, because the book, I know Stevenson was influenced by that book on the bicameral mind, just like, you remember Ford, the character Ford, who's straight out of Brave New World also, by the way. Ford as the, I don't know, is he the demiurge in Westworld? How he says, he goes on that spiel about the, he goes on that rant thing about the bicameral mind when he's looking at the painting by Michelangelo. You remember that scene, you guys? Which I thought, by the way, was totally cringe. He's looking at the painting of from the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and he says, no, Clarice, actually it was the brain. It was the brain that was there the whole time staring at everyone, when actually he's looking at the pineal gland, which is pretty creepy. Anyway, but again, the point is the maximalist sense of the baroque within the novel, and the fact that it's all there and it's all been coded by these hackers who sort of function as demigods within the system. And you can see, of course, why Zuckerberg and Elon Musk would love, and Jeff Bezos would love this damn book, because this is their dream. This is like, oh, we get to do this. We get to create all this. And another thing is the idea of the binary system, which is obviously integral to both tech, the internet, and the novel itself. So what I did was, I love doing this, like in novels like this. I did this in White Noise at one point, and then I also did it in this book, which is just I made a list of some of the verbiage in the novel that I love the language in terms of like it's it's neologisms, right? And it's pretty. The language is full. And the words are sort of delicious in a way in this book. And so here are a couple things that occur in the book, terms and words that occur in the book that are so relevant now. And even if they're not called by that name, you'll understand. Even okay, so again, to Stevenson's to his credit, like he even talks about the idea, the fact that naming, right? We've talked about that before, and how in the act of identification and naming and being a substantial person occurs in Genesis, right? With the naming of the animals, naming of the creatures, and he goes the wrong way with it, and basically his sort of underlying thesis in the book is one that I think Bret Easton Ellis was critical of this, which was that he compares language and existence to a computer code, right? In that, it's coded. It's almost like deistic. It's like it's coded, and then it runs on a code of enumeration, right? And quantification. Everything's quantified, and he talks about that early in the book, how certain numbers are like hackers go crazy over these numbers because they're all multiples of two, right? With the binary code, but he doesn't get. It's like he's making this metaphysical world, but denying the metaphysical. He's trying to say that everything is quantified, and we sort of get that with the Great Reset and everything that we're going through, how this is their goal. This is their goal, people. These are their plans. So I'm going to go over some of these terms. Am I making sense? I mean, it's hard to make sense of this. I don't want to say it's hard to make sense of the novel, but if you read the novel, you will understand exactly what I'm talking about. So of course I wrote down maximalism, baroque, and binary. And one of the interesting things was the info war. I mean, he mentions the informational war a number of times, and it's the opposite of our man AJ and his info war, because his info war is a war on the info war, right? In this, it's like information is their sort of god. And again, my personal critique with this would be that my interpretation of Stevenson's writing and the speaker in the novel is that they constantly do what many people do, what many tech people do, and many pod people do, which is confuse information with ideas. Okay, and this is like the experiments that they did. Remember they had the chess match, right? And they would they would do deep. Was it Deep Blue? Was it Deep Blue against I don't know, the chess masters, right? And the chess masters would win, and then finally Deep Blue wins, and that's one thing, because you have a set number of movements that you can make on the 5D chessboard, right? But it's within the parameters of the chessboard. The difference with that is that one other thing that they did, especially in the 90s, I remember them doing this in the 90s, was they said, oh, we can, the computers and AI are so smart now, we can get them to write poems. Now, you may think this is a pretty stupid thing to talk about or cringe, but I see this as pretty key, because whenever they did this, the poems would be terrible. Now, the rebuttal against that would be that, who's to judge the poem? Okay, well, if we talk about form, content, and meaning, okay, and yes, I would say that the what they've done is clearly, crawl the web for random words and fit them into a poem without meaning. It's an exercise in nihilism, and I also realize that there are poets who do this, right? I mean, E. Cummings is kind of a almost like a computer bot, you know, poet of nihilism in the sense that it's like, oh, I'm going to use words and the words don't matter because nothing matters is his view, right? But these things are always shit. They're always terrible. There's like one E. Cummings poem that I like, um, and that's why his poems, you know, they never have capitalization and punctuation, not because he's being edgy. He is okay. He's edgy when he first does it, but it's like the poem has to match up. The words have to have meaning. They have to matter. Remember, we talked about the definition of poems, of poetry, right? The best words in the best order. You're not choosing the best words in the best order. You're just choosing words and putting them into a code. And so, that's what I'm talking about, is essentially that computers can do a lot of things, right? But what they do is spew information that is put in by the coder. They don't create, they can't make ideas. They can make information. And so let me go through a list of some of these terms here. Exoset. It's interesting. He mentions the Exoset missile system. Uzi dudes. That's pretty cool. There's Uzi dudes, and they are the private, one of the private prison complex neighborhood libertarian private armies. The enforcers are like sort of, I don't know, sort of Delta Force black shirts in that are just pure violence. Burbclaves are like, you know, the suburbs and the enclave, and that is what I'm talking about when I say that, like, it's a very 90s vision of the future. Because if you were alive in the 90s, I mean, okay, well, maybe vouch for me for this. It's like the suburbs were like this whole thing in the 90s, which was like, oh, I'm a like a preteen, or I'm a teenager, and I live in the Edward Scissorhands suburbs where like everything looks the same, you know, and you know everybody just does the same thing. And man, I wish I could escape from here and, you know, do something cool, right? And yeah, there's a point to that, and that was certainly substantial at the time. I mean, that's what Eric Bogosian's play Suburbia is about. That's a good play. Suburbia is about, but it's also like, it's kind of a level one way of looking at things. The real way to look at things now, I think, right, would be essentially the planned suburb and the pod city, right, versus nature. There is no nature in this book. No Nature. Who wrote No Nature? It was Gary Snyder. Gary Snyder, the beat poet, wrote the book No Nature, right? And their ideas about religion are so low IQ, and so they go to ask the librarian. The librarian is essentially the it's like, you remember that scene in, if you've read War of the Worlds, right? Or if you've seen not the latest, it's like 20 years old now, but the one with Guy Pearce where they go, he's in the future and he like goes to the Smithsonian, the globalist Smithsonian, right? Base mom is trying to educate the youth right now to keep them away from the damn basement of the Smithsonian. Please do not go there, right? The globalist Smithsonian has the librarian bot, right? And he essentially like answers questions, right? He's essentially he's like a Sybil, and it's interesting because mythology does play a role in this with the Sybil and the who's the other character? How the virus functions as a Medusa, right? It's a Gorgon, because if you look at the snow crash, if you crack the hypercard open and look at the bitmap, it essentially turns you to stone, but in a sort of neo-techno way, right? You're rendered, you're incapacitated, right? Shouts out to Tamara out there. Shouts out to our longtime OG homegirl Tamara. Hope you're doing well out there. Love to see you. We have burbclaves. They don't call them orthobros in the book. They call them orthos, but schizoids, cyberpunk, Pizza gate, um, psychic vampires and blood traffickers play a role in this because we figure out that what they say is that the bad guy was unable to um, basically he hijacked religion, right? And he was using it for his world domination schemes. And so, in order to do that and to infect everyone with a virus, he couldn't be too blatant about it. And so, what he did was he said, okay, I'm going to do it through sort of the teen culture of drugs. And so, people will buy the newest, they think they're buying the newest speedball synthoid fentanyl drug, but instead they're buying a drug that completely incapacitates them in the metaverse and in real life, and it's based on blood. It actually infects their blood, and so he's sort of trying to stay alive for he wants to live forever through hijacking the blood of the youth. Narcolombians. So it's interesting that we have this dichotomy between the corporate Fed state, which has been privatized, and the mafia narcolombian narco state, which obviously we see now is a real thing, right? Look at Mexico and the United States, or anywhere in the world where this is sort of where this is a thing. But of course, you have to keep in mind is that it is funded by the capstone of the pyramid. And they even talk in the book about how the feds are sort of seem impervious to the snow crash. If they look at it, nothing happens to them. But that's because they are part of the implementation system, the delivery system. They help to write it. Enforcers, feds, gargoyles. Gargoyles are like sort of feds that pop up in the metaverse that everyone knows automatically. They know that they're FEDS and they try and stay away from them. We have bodymods. Bodymods play a gigantic role in this. Bodymods, the MK Delta, and the sort of samurai wielding wetworks assassin, samurai sword wielding with the katana. We have transhumanism. We have fembots and TRANZ as a subculture within the metaverse. YT, of course, as I mentioned, is the female character who is, obviously what we're on now. There's a sort of a verbal mix-up between Google and goggles in this, because obviously you have to jack into the mainframe and put on your Oculus, and the goggles, like that's pure Ready Player One, right? Ready Player One, Tron-esque, this sort of ever-present, ubiquitous, unchanging idea of getting into the system through your sense data, right? We have Fortnite. Son, I'm gonna need you to put down the Nintendos. I'm gonna need you to put away the fork knife, and I'm gonna need you to mow the grass. All right? I don't care who you think you're beating in the fork knife. I'm gonna beat your butt if you don't mow the grass. The Black Pyramid and the Capstone, and then later the Black Cube. The Black Cube is the thing that the elites, it's the sort of corporate system that the elites own, and that allows them to have their tentacles, their Lovecraftian tentacles, their Spectre tentacles in all the various systems in reality or IRL. Welcome to reality. You know that Grimes song? Grimes freaking loves this book. You can tell. Just listen to Grimes, and you just know that she's just all over this book. Zodiacs, smart wheels. They like when they ride their motorcycles and stuff like that. It's kind of cool because they're not quite at like Return of the Jedi land speeders. They have like motorcycles, but the motorcycles all the vehicles in the book, like if you have enough tech and you have enough money are smart vehicles, in that, like, when you're riding a motorcycle, the wheels will contract and the spokes will retract, and it can read. There's like a scanning camera on the front of the motorcycle that allows you to, like, read the terrain for wherever you're going. So that's kind of a cool idea. Not that I like that, like to exist. I'm just saying it's kind of a cool, like, thing to read about, right? Let's see. Gnosticism and Kabbalah are mentioned blatantly in the novel. The Essenes. There's also the strip mall Pentecostal cults, and it's so obvious. You read this book and you go, oh, this is so obvious what the bad guy is. And then, like, the big reveal. I mean, maybe that's just because we're so based here that we automatically know what the bad guy's up to when we read it, and or maybe it's just because it's real life, right? That he's just using this. I mean, they talk about, like, the missionary work that they do, which is essentially inoculating the third world against VIRUSs, which are also computer VIRUSs, but they can't do that in the first world because everybody will know what's up. So they got to do it through drugs, right? L. Ron Hubbard, Pastor Randy Balls. The money is this is like post hyperinflation. So the money, like, when they deal with money, they deal with it in, like, trillions of dollars. They don't deal with, like, dollars or hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. They deal with trillions. And the money is also privatized. So the money is referred to as, at one point, kongbucks, because the Hong Kong mafia have, like, their own balkanized system. And then there's also Mises bucks. Shouts out to our boy L. Ron Hubbard Paul. And then there's also Gipper bucks, which is pretty funny, right? Zoomers out there. Reagan was called the Gipper because there's this old movie, right, where Ronald Reagan, who was the president, he was a movie star, right? And he said in the movie, win one for the Gipper, right? So they're called Gipper bucks. His nickname also, by the way, Reagan's nickname, people forget this, but his other nickname that people called him in terms of politics was Dutch. And I've got his biography up here somewhere. Yeah, it's right up there, Edmund Morris, which is not a great biography, by the way. I will not be covering that one, but it is interesting. There are interesting parts to it. There's also Deep Blue is mentioned. Google Earth. Google Earth supposedly got their idea straight from this book, because what happens is, in the metaverse, the CIC/CIA has a 3D. It's more than 3D. It's like hyper 3D Prism. Prism project. Snowden Prism project 3D metadata map of the entire world, and it reminded me of the Seeing Stones and Palantir, right? But it's straight up Google Earth, right? So everything is mapped and quantified, and hero protagonist has access to this because he's a hacker. And by the way, one of the ways that he is able to defeat or get around this snow crash is, like, he knows what he's looking at without looking at it. So at one point he's in the Black Pyramid, and somebody tries to show him the hypercard, and when they crack it open, like, he dodges it and he looks away because he's smart enough to know not to look at it. And that's because one of the things that exists that, again, is like, when they're walking through the metaverse, or when they're online, they're constantly barraged with ads and GIFs. And they don't call them GIFs in this, but they're constantly barraged with, like, animated text and animated videos that, like, within the book, the normies within the book cannot, like, X out of, right? Or they don't have an ad blocker or whatever. But because he writes the programs, he knows to avoid it. And then he creates a program called Snow Scan, which basically allows him to, he writes a program and he creates a code where, like, web crawlers will, like, look at the data without looking at it and then give him an indication of what's in it, and that lets him know that if you look at it, you'll crash and you'll die in real life, which is kind of a cool idea. But again, it's like that, Isaac idea of like these nerds are going to kill us, right? That's what the book basically is. Let's see, wet works, dry works, ghost guns. They've got ghost guns because at the beginning when he's a PIZZA delivery guy, they're constantly being attacked by like, neo-futuristic highwayman, rogue, warrior, anti-Mad Max, I don't know, city pod people who are trying to jack their PIZZA. Why are they going after? Who cares about the microwave PIZZA? Who cares about that, right? Why is it this all-encompassing system where like if you don't deliver your stuff on time, you get arrested? It's you see why I'm adding the GATE to it, right? Because there's something else. There's fake flags, right? Are in this deep fakes. He predicted deep flakes. He predicted deep flakes and deep fakes in the book. Not only predicted them, but wrote them. See, do you get how the book itself functions as code? The book is doing exactly what he's describing within the book, which I think is pretty clever. Not that I like it. Stuff is obviously demented in this sort of hellscape that they've created, but it's interesting that like it's about the metaverse and the characters are all meta and they all sort of fold one on top of the other in terms of reality and perception, and it's about binary code and ones and zeros, and how when you read the book you obviously, I guess people, what I got from it was, oh, I get it, right? We're the zeros and they are the, we're the power off, they are the power on, right? We're the nothing and they are the overlords. And the book is like meant to be entertaining because it's meant to like fold you into the system where this code will overwrite you and rewrite you, and now you exist there and not here, and everything that they tell you about the way things are, man, is like people just accept this, especially when they get to the parts on religion, because they go on these ridiculous, edgy, low, it's like edgy, chapters on religion and how, okay, for example, it's like, Eve wasn't really Eve, man. She was Astarte, and, you read the book and you go, I read one essay on the book and it was like, the guy was like, my ideas about religion were completely changed by a snow crash because I realized that Eve was, and it's like, you're just doing exactly what the book is saying, right? You had your little code, and the librarian, meaning the voice of the intelligence agencies, came and told you that it was a different way, and you didn't do any. All of your knowledge is sense data, so you just took it and put it into your own brain code, and then you ran with it, right? You didn't think about the fact that they are telling you things without any backing or without any kind of deep self-reflection or reflection that you're in your coom pod in the metaverse, and that that's not reality, right? Smart cities, right? Google City lifestyle, right? I being from the South, living in a Walmart, the Target City, the pod life, ISO cubes are in this book. Sort of fentanyl synthoids. There's like all these like Clockwork Orange-esque drugs that are like obviously supposed to be, well, they mention it by name. They're opiates. It's like cocaine, opiates, downers, and computer viruses all mixed in one in a techno drug. Hypersonic weapons, DEWs, darpadogs. Darpadogs are in this, and it's crazy because it's obviously supposed to be, you're supposed to be shocked when you read the book that like they're chased by these robo dogs that are like, they've got all these like body mods and like, you know, they're made of steel and like, you know, they're they're cybernetic, but the characters will say there's something living inside of that. It's alive. And then later on in the book, you hear that they took these dogs upon which they were experimenting, and that reminds me of Near Here. And I hate to mention this because it's so fucking sick, but I won't get into it too much. But the shit that they were doing with BEAGLES, I don't even want to say the word, that they were doing at not Walter Reed, but whatever the VA hospital is here, and then they finally exposed. But that's what they were doing, and then they were adding these body modifications to them, and then it turns out that they are loyal to one of the characters in the book, and then the plot hinges on them because they're a life force, right? There's life inside them, and they do have loyalty, which is something that supersedes the completely empirical, I would say almost self-serving, egotistical, like inverted Satan vision that is espoused as virtue within the novel. Listen, shouts out to everybody out there. Thank you for joining me on this. And I know I'm babbling, but guess what? I'm not babbling without a purpose, because one of the key elements of the plot and one of the major elements of sort of pseudo-metaphysics in the book is talking about how Babel, the biblical Babel, was not Babel, and how the characters say Babel was actually the best thing that happened to human beings because it created code, is what they say in the book. So, you know, I'm babbling on here, but that's because I'm trying to convey the wide-ranging, sort of disparate notion of the way that the plot and the events and the narrative occur within the book, and that also mirrors and mimics the way that this techno-universe has been set up, right? Wi-Fi and data. Small point in the book, but like I just found it astounding that, I mean, again, like this is 1992, you guys. If you were listening, if you're watching this now and you were even alive in 1992, think about what you were doing in 1992. I remember exactly what I was doing. In 1992, I was smoking my first cigarette at a Steve Miller Band concert with my homeboys, my best friend, who is still my best friend and has been my best friend. Shouts out to T out there. Shouts out to T, Big Woody, my best friend out there, has been my best friend since I was a baby. And I was smoking my first cigarette at a Steve Miller Band concert, Steve Miller Band and Big Head Todd and the Monsters at the Classic Amphitheater, and it was a Camel Light because we had Camel Club, right? Because that was cool in the early '90s. I was listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers and Pearl Jam and Nirvana. I was watching MTV. I was at school. I was playing lacrosse. I was in my first band, Atomic Finger, which was badass. I was going out with this fawning girl that I'm not going to mention her on here, but my first girlfriend, right? 1993, I was going on my first date, watching Jurassic Park. You know, I was doing like, I don't know, in my opinion, I was doing pretty normal fucking dude things, right? I certainly wasn't sitting around thinking about the damn metaverse. This is crazy. And I know this guy's born in the 60s, you know, it's all that stuff. And oh, by the way, you know where Neal Stephenson was born? Fort Meade. This guy was born like in an NSA facility. All right? I mean, literally, it's crazy. So yeah, Wi-Fi and data plays an important role in this, because they talk about how when you're in your pod, you know, or you're in your future vehicle, and you plug out of the system, which is essentially Wi-Fi, right? You have to connect to what he calls radio and airwaves. And remember that at the time, I mean, remember cell phones were around. You see Big Lebowski, right? Cell phones were around, but of course, you know, they were like plugged in. They were like a permanent part of your car, right? And you had to jam on those numbers hard. You know, you wanted to call your friend, you beep, burp. You had to really press hard, and they would light up orange. And remember, you guys remember in like 2008 when everything changed over, and there was no longer like the rabbit ears on the television, and they said no, we're going into digital world now, and everybody was like, but what about the rabbit ears? Right. Well, think about '92, right? Um, and so you got Wi-Fi and data, and how like when you're in the metaverse and you're on data, it's slightly like the characters and their avatars appear slightly more grainy, right? They're like not as trustworthy. You don't have as strong Wi-Fi. And there we go, plugged in again. Okay, and let's see. Also, ratio. Ratio occurs in this as a term, which is pretty cool. Let's see what else. Finally, the idea of sterility. This is a sterile world, and that is one of the things that made me compare it to this book, White Noise. In Don DeLeo's White Noise, which I'm going to cover after No Country for Old Men, the worldview is essentially that, Jack Gladney is this professor in this postmodern, 1985 Reagan world, where there is a toxic airborne event, is what he calls it in the book, and it's a mix of like direct energy weapon, brain pan, voice of God TI technology, and argon, xenon, and isotopes, and cadmium. In other words, they are bombarding and assaulting entire towns and villages. Like you remember in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which of course JD covered over at Jay's Analysis, does obviously the best analysis of that film. You remember in that film, not only are they going to making models of the Devil's Rock, but when the fake and grays appear, what does the military use as their excuse that they cordon off the whole area so that the fake and grays can come? They say, "Oh no, we're testing atmospheric ionization, right? And basically heart machines in the atmosphere." You remember they did that over, what was it, St. Louis? They did that. They sprayed the atmosphere. They ionized the atmosphere, and all those people got sick in the village. They used that in 1977 in that movie as the excuse. If that's just the excuse, what's the reality? And that's essentially, that's so ingrained in this world. I mean, they live in an acid rain district on the edge of FEMA Zone 666, right? You got to make your way to the outer dunes just to live and breathe some fresh air. And sterility is obviously in this. There's a scene where at the end of the book, maybe I'll just read this to you. There's a scene where the character Raven he sexes up YT, and even the way that this passage is pretty funny, because it's like the Zuckerbot nerd version of sexing up, which is like, it's like so ridiculous. These Koompod incels like finally get their chance or whatever. And what happens is he has sex with YT, and see if I can find the passage here. And I'm not going to be able to find it. And I'll just tell you what happens. What happens is he immediately falls asleep, and is described as like, he's like a femoid for doing this, for falling asleep. And it's because her last line of defense is that she has a body mod injection inside of her, where if she's VIOLATED, it shoots it penetrates the person with a sort of miniature, like almost like a miniature drone hypodermic filled with narcotics, and knocks him out. So, it's like there's so many levels of inversion here, and it's like the sterility of their world is replete. I want to read you what it says about the metaverse. I'm going to read you some passages here because you're going to find this pretty revelatory. Shouts out to everybody here. Please make sure that you smash that like, of course. Share the stream if you can. We're trying to get up to 1,000 subs. We're getting there, you guys. And our homeboy Jerry out there at Exposing Powerful Lies live streams is, if he's not there already, I think he might already be there. So shouts out to Jerry, who is our based homeboy here, and who will be big time Alpha Esa Lab soon. So shouts out to Jerry. He's already an Alpha Esa Lab in my books. And I'm trying to get up to 1,000. We'll get there soon. And again, I mentioned at the beginning, hopefully I can make it to, hopefully we can all, but I can make it to Orlando for the Dire Stock 2, which is September 3rd. That'd be sweet. Shouts out to everybody who supported me because I got this thing extracted right here. And let's see, what else? Yeah, and so if you would support me, look at those links that my friends and confidants and homeboys are dropping in the chat there, and support me. Shouts out to my sis that I see in the chat right now. Shouts out to Kristen out there, Andre Kane. Shouts out to William Kane. Shouts out to TGF and everybody out there. And please, yeah, if you're watching this now or later, anybody out there, please think about supporting me via those links in the channel description. If you go to YouTube and you're on like a desktop computer or a laptop, you can actually click the links in the I got 2 links up there, the PayPal and the Cash App link in the banner photo at the top. Otherwise, you can go channel description and you can support me however you want. So thank you for that. So let's read what it says about the metaverse here on page 29. It says, let's see, it says, down inside the computer are 3 lasers. A red one, a green one, and a blue one. See how it's the 90s version, right? A 90s version of the future, but essentially it's the same, right? Because that is true, right? The blending of the 3 lights on the spectrum. They are powerful enough to make a bright light, but not powerful enough to burn through the back of your eyeball and broil your brain, your brain pan. Fry your frontals, laze your lobes. I love the alliteration there, though. That's good. I like that. Because the alliteration is conveying the sense of the sort of seamless liquidity of technology mixed with real life, right? It's not cacophonous, it's like euphonous. As everyone learned in elementary school, these 3 colors of light can be combined with different intensities to produce any color that hero's eye is capable of seeing. In this way, a narrow beam of color can be shot out of the innards of the computer up through the fisheye lens in any direction, which is through your Google Glass, your goggles, and your Oculus. Through the use of electronic mirrors inside the computer, this beam is made to sweep back and forth across the lenses of heroes' goggles in much the same way as the electron beam in a television paints the inner surface of the eponymous tube. The eponymous tube, the Y tube, the resulting image hangs in space in front of heroes' view of capital R reality. By drawing a slightly different image in front of each eye, the image can be made 3-dimensional. By changing the image 72 times a second, it can be made to move. By drawing the moving 3-dimensional image at a resolution of 2K pixels on a side, it can be as sharp as the eye can perceive. And by pumping stereo digital sound through the little earphones, the moving 3D pictures can have a perfectly realistic soundtrack. Remember, they also do this in Brave New World when they go to their ORGIES and they hear the symphonic, sort of Clockwork Orange, Wendy Carlos symphonic music, and they are like strapped in with their goggles and the music, the stereophonic music that they hear, which is essentially to say that, you know, they're overwhelmed through the mix of empirical data and soma that has debased them into the level of beasts, even though they are the alpha class in Brave New World Society. So Hero's not actually here at all. He's in a computer-generated universe that his computer is drawing onto his goggles and pumping into his earphones. In the lingo, this imaginary place is known as the metaverse. Hero spends a lot of time in the metaverse. It beats the shit out of the you store it. The you store it is like, you know, it's like 90s lingo for, you remember that scene I love that scene in Point Break. Remember where Bodhi's like, you know, every day, man. You know, they get up, they go to work in their metal coffins, man. We're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna do that, right? We're not gonna be the same as everybody, man. You can't put me in a cage, Johnny. You know I can't stand a cage, man. What am I gonna paddle to New Zealand? Shouts out to OK out there. Let's see. He says there's a professional road surfer. I'm gonna skip over that one. Here we go with Avatar. Okay, so this is chapter 5, page 44. He says, as Hero approaches the street, he sees two young couples probably using their parents' computers for a double date in the metaverse, climbing down out of Port Zero, which is the local port of entry and monorail stop. So it's kind of it's like living in, you know, the monorail is kind of like Epcot Center. We're living in Epcot Center, you know, entering through your Matrix port. He is not seeing real people, of course. This is all a part of a moving illustration drawn by his computer according to specifications coming down the fiber optic cable. The people are pieces of software called avatars. Just to reiterate, that is why we use the word avatar now in computer speak, because it comes from this book directly. They are the audio-visual bodies that people use to communicate with each other in the metaverse. Hero's avatar is now on the street too, and if the couple's coming off the monorail look over in his direction, they can see him just as he's seeing them. They could strike up a conversation. Hero in the U Store in LA, which is essentially his grime pod, it's his Ready Player One Elysium, you know, garbage world Wally grime pod from which he is able to get into the metaverse. Right. It says in LA, 4 teenagers probably on a couch in a suburb of Chicago, each with their own laptop. It's so true, right? But they probably won't talk to each other any more than they would in reality. They are nice kids, and they don't want to talk to a solitary crossbreed with a slick custom avatar who's packing a couple of swords, because that's what Hero is. He's Japanese American. I'll get later to Raven and how he is it actually brought up something pretty interesting in terms of where Raven comes from, because he's from the Aleutian Islands. And I'll get to that. It says, your avatar can look any way you want it to, up to the limitations of your equipment. If you're ugly, you can make your avatar beautiful. If you've just gotten out of bed, your avatar can still be wearing beautiful clothes and professionally applied makeup. You can look like a gorilla or a dragon in the metaverse. Spend 5 minutes walking down the street and you will see all of these. Hero's avatar looks just like Hero, with the difference that no matter what Hero is wearing in reality, his avatar always wears a black leather kimono. Most hacker types don't go in for garish avatars because they know it takes a lot more sophistication to render a realistic human face than to render a human face. Kind of the way people who really know clothing can appreciate the fine details that separate a cheap gray wool suit from an expensive hand-tailored gray wool suit. That makes me think of The Gray Man. Have you guys seen that movie? You guys seen The Gray Man? The new Ryan Gosling movie? Ryan Gosling and Mark Hackard are on what's his name? Chris Jethro. What's the guy's name who plays Captain America? Chris. He looks just like Mark Hackard. Anyway, it's got Ryan Gosling. And I don't know. What'd you guys think of it? If you guys haven't seen it, it's new on Netflix. And, of course, it's The Gray Man to those, I know you guys know, but it's The Gray Man because it's actually kind of ironic in the film because Chris Evans, yeah, thank you. Because the Gray Man is obviously the name for, the kind of lingo for the spy, right? Because the Gray Man is the guy who can kind of blend into the background. He's, he can go anywhere because he has no characteristics that are, that are set him apart from anybody. He can go unnoticed in a crowd. That's one of the, sort of spy craft, tradecraft like things, right? And also that he seems to be gray in terms of his, obviously, in a metaphysical sense, he seems to be gray in terms of his morals, right? How he is not loyal to he's loyal to his agency and to himself and to whatever their system is. But I always think of I liked it. I thought it was cool. I like the how it's I like how it's colorized. It's very it pops, y'all. And I always like Gosling. I like Gosling because Gosling is and Mark Hackard slash Chris. What's his name again? Damn it, I got dementia. Not Chris Pratt. Chris Evans. Thank you. Damn. Where am I? Chris Evans is they're 1980, right? They're like around 1980 guys, and I like Gosling because I like the movie Drive, and I thought he was cool in Place Beyond the Pines. I've always liked him. I think he's pretty cool. And I thought it was a good movie, but the irony is that he's not a gray man at all, right? This guy is he's all swagged out. He's like the most badass MK Delta Wetworks Division guy. But I can't help when I think the gray man. I can't help but think of, you remember that Norm Macdonald joke about Albert Fish? And he says, he was known as the gray man. And the guy says, the grain man? He says, the gray man. People described him as gray. It's a very bad description, he says. But you get what he's saying because he mixes it in the background. He says, that guy was a real jerk. Remember that? Jethro says, I said I was going to do an Only God Forgives breakdown. No, I did not say that. I did not say that. And I will not be doing that movie. Jethro's trying to troll my ass. No, but we should do a Nicholas Winding Refn breakdown. I mean, that's film, so I'd have to find a literary basis in which to do that. But, I would love to be able to. Jethro's been trying to set up a watch along, you guys, with the Rave app, and I think it's something cool. I think it's a great idea because I don't know how to do watch alongs with Discord or anything like that. I'm totally illiterate with how that goes, and I don't know how to get it on here, how to do a watch along on here. Somebody have to educate me with that. But maybe one day we can schedule a watch along, and it would be 12 hours, right? Of what's it called? Too Old to Die Young. But you guys, if you haven't seen Too Old to Die Young, I think it's it's one of these highly revelatory Lynchian, Nicholas Winding Refn, statements about it's I don't know, you have to watch it, right? The OTO, Hitmen, Assassins, David Lynch, neon-soaked atmosphere, cartels. It's on Amazon, and in fact, if you go to that, it's not going to pop up right away. You got to search for it. But I think it's I've seen it. It's worth watching. Anyway, sorry, I'm babbling. So it says you can't materialize anywhere in the universe like Captain Kirk beaming down from on high. See that's what I'm talking about when I talk about how this is a '90s vision of the future, because a lot of his pop culture references are so Tarantino. They're not Tarantino, but they're in the sort of same universe in terms of the pop culture references are almost boomer references. But in a way that matches with what I was saying earlier about being a geriatric millennial and how the references are Generation X references, right? Because Generation X is like, those were the adults who were creating the culture, and I was a young person being subjected to it, so I think that I'm Gen X, when in fact I don't know, right? But his references in the book do that a lot. He's got a lot of, some of them are so cliche that I think they're so cliche and bad that they're purposeful. They have to be, because he's essentially commenting on the cringe nature of people that you meet in the metaverse making these kind of comments. He does like these weird catchphrases and stuff that appear in Family Guy like over and over, ironically. And then materializing like Captain Kirk. That's obviously, you can see this guy, my phone keeps falling. You can see this guy making those kinds of references because of his generational gap, right? Or because of that is his sort of system. Okay, there we go. So he says, this would be confusing and irritating to people around you. It would break the metaphor. Materializing out of nowhere or vanishing back in reality is considered to be a private function best done in the confines of your own house. Most avatars nowadays are anatomically correct and naked when they're first created, so in any case, you have to make yourself decent before you emerge onto the street, this capital street. It's like the main thoroughfare within the metaverse. Unless you're something intrinsically indecent and you don't care. If you are some peon who does not own a house, capital H house, for example, a person who's coming in from a public terminal, then you materialize in a port. There are 256 express ports on the street, evenly spaced around its circumference at intervals of 256 kilometers. Each of these intervals is further subdivided 256 times with local ports, spaced exactly 1 kilometer apart. Astute students of hacker semiotics will note the obsessive repetition of the number 256, which is 2 to the 8th power. Even that 8 looks pretty juicy, dripping with 2 to the 2nd power, or 2 squared additional 2 S's, or 2 additional 2's. The ports serve a function analogous to airports. This is where you drop into the metaverse from somewhere else. Once you have materialized in a port, you can walk down the street or hop on the monorail or whatever. So it's just like world building and the functions of the metaverse, right? Oh yeah, he says the let's see, K-Tel said the other girl is a Brandy. Her date is a Clint. Brandy and Clint are both popular off-the-shelf models of avatars. When white trash high school girls are going on a date in the metaverse, they invariably run down to the computer game section of the local Walmart and buy a copy of Brandy. The user can select. Okay, skip that. Let's see. Clint is just the male counterpart of Brandy. He is craggy and handsome and has an extremely limited range of facial expressions. That's so true, isn't it? That's kind of funny. He's craggy, right? He's craggly rock, right? Old Clint. Hero wonders idly how these two couples got together. They're clearly from disparate social classes, perhaps older and younger siblings, but when they come down the escalator and disappear into the crowd and become part of the street, where there are enough Clints and Brandys to found a new ethnic group. The street is fairly busy. Most people here are Americans and Asians. It's early morning in Europe right now. Because of the preponderance of Americans, the crowd has a garish and surreal look about it. For the Asians, it's the middle of the day, and they are in dark blue suits. For the Americans, it's party time, and they are looking like just about anything a computer can render. The moment Hero steps across the line separating his neighborhood from the street, colored shapes begin to swoop down on him from all directions, like buzzards on fresh roadkill. And immersials are not allowed in Hero's neighborhood. These are gifts, right? But almost anything is allowed in the street. And then later, Hero, I can't understand why you're holding out on me. We're making bucks here, kongbucks and yen, and we can be flexible on pay and bennies. We're putting together a swords and sorcery thing, and we can use a hacker with your skills. Come on down and talk to me, okay? Which is interesting because he's essentially a D&D character in a way, right? Except for his sorcery is coding and hacking, and his metaphysics are like the magic of computer rendering. And it's also interesting, the kongbucks. I talked about the kongbucks, right? Kind of like Dugan coin. All right, let's talk about the Black Pyramid. This is on page 48. He cuts straight across the street and under the monorail line, headed for a large, low-slung black building. It is extraordinarily somber for the street, like a parcel that someone forgot to develop. It's a squat black pyramid with the top cut off. Hello? Illuminate confirm. Right? The capstone is missing because the capstone, the actual elite, is missing from the metaverse. They create the metaverse, or they have people create the metaverse, but they're not actually in it. They're not going to appear. It has one single door. Since this is all imaginary, there are no regulations dictating the number of emergency exits. There are no guards, no signs, nothing to bar people from going in, yet thousands of avatars mill around peering inside, looking for a glimpse of something. These people can't pass through the door because they haven't been invited. And then it says, above the door is a black hemisphere about a meter in diameter set into the front wall of the building. It is the closest thing that the place has to decoration. Underneath it, in letters carved into the wall's black substance, is the name of the place, the Black Sun. Wow. Okay, now we can't talk really too much about what that is and how that is relevant now, especially in that place, in that continent over there, in the eastern part of the continent, and the certain division that begins with an A, and the symbolism of the black sun. Um, but it's interesting that that is the sort of place where they gather and worship, right? We also have NPCs occur here, and then we have Hero is just a starving CIC stringer who lives in a U-store by the airport. But in the entire world, there are only a couple of thousand people who could step over the line into the black sun. He can only step over, only he can, and a few thousand people can step over the line in the black sun because only a few certain people are useful to the elite class enough to be allowed to be invited into their system, right? Yeah, we're doing a little late night streaming. It's called a little late night streaming. We do a little late night streaming. Shouts out to my sister out there. And then let's see, just a description of Snow Crash. This is page 51. I'm not going to go through all these notes. I'm just going to go through some of the most relevant ones. I got to stop doing that where that damn tooth came out. Knock them 100 stitches late. Not late. Knock them loose, right? I don't know. I think I'm being pretty stoic with this. Whatever. This says, a lot of people hang around in front of the black sun saying weird things. You ignore them, but this gets Hero's attention, right? They're Fed posting. Oddity, the first. The guy knows Hero's name, but people have ways of getting that information. It's probably nothing. The second, this sounds like an offer from a drug pusher, which would be normal in front of a reality bar, but this is the metaverse, and you can't sell drugs in the metaverse because you can't get high by looking at something. The third, the name of the drug. Hero's never heard of a drug called Snow Crash before. That's not unusual. 1,000 new drugs get invented every year, and each of them sells under half a dozen brand names. But Snow Crash is computer lingo. It means a system crash, a bug, at such a fundamental level that it frags the part of the computer that controls the electron beam in the monitor, making it spray wildly across the screen, turning the perfect grid work of pixels into a gyrating blizzard. Hero's seen it 500,000 times, but it's a very peculiar name for a drug. And the guy says, you want to try some Snow Crash, man? And then he reaches into his pocket, pulls out a hyper card, and then they have these. So they have these. The black sun, the black pyramid, has the yeah. They're like exactly, DJ. They are like they're NFTs. They're basically NFTs. And what happens is, if you pull out a NFT or you try and talk to somebody in the black sun, the bouncers will come along and they're called demons. Interesting. And the demons will bounce you out and throw you into the meta hell world. But what's really meta is the fact that Hero works sort of in and around and amongst these demons in the metaverse. But IRL, he is doing the same thing because he is a stringer for the CIA CIC, right? This says, page 53, a wide variety, or more likely a hypercard can carry a virtually infinite amount of information. For all Hero knows, this hypercard might contain all of the books in the Library of Congress. And in this world, like the Library of Congress has mixed with the CIA, which is essentially, they've created wikis. It's essentially Wikipedia, right? For all, it says, or every episode, and if you guys know that, right, about Wikipedia being a three-letter agency operation, controlled opposition, changing definitions. I don't know, maybe. What do you guys think? Hero naturally wouldn't touch it under any circumstances any more than you would take a free syringe from a stranger in Times Square and jab it in your neck. And it doesn't make sense anyway. That's a hypercard. I thought you said Snow Crash was a drug, Hero says, now totally nonplussed. It is, the guy says. Try it. Does it fuck up your brain, Hero says, or your computer? Both, neither. What's the difference? That's the key. It fucks up both, right? And neither because it's saying that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to the elites what happens to you. Depop. Hero finally realizes that he just wasted 60 seconds of his life having a meaningless conversation with a paranoid schizophrenic. Schizoids. And he turns around and goes into the Black Sun. Of course, that's later going to pop up as the main plot point, right? TGF says they're playing fucking drums upstairs. Oh, man. Going up there and drum their ass out of there. No, you should turn on some Lars, bro. Turn on some Lars. Turn the speakers up to the ceiling. Play that flutter kick in the song One just on a loop continuously. That's not advice. I don't give advice, you know that. But it'd be funny. Remember in Clockwork Orange when they put the speakers up to the ceiling, playing the Fifth? After Vitaly Chernobyl, it's page 124, and the meltdowns arrived in Long Beach on one of those hijacked ex-Soviet refugee freighters. They fanned out across Southern California looking for expanses of reinforced concrete that were as vast and barren as the one they had left behind in Kiev. Uh-oh. More relevance. This book is supposing that there was a war in that place, in that continent, and that now there are refugees. They needed such environments in order to practice their art. The LA River was a natural site, and there were plenty of nice overpasses. They picked their way down a broad corridor, excusing themselves every inch of the way as they step over little Mayan encampments and Buddhist shrines and white trash stoned on vertigo, apple pie, fuzzy buzzy, narthex, mustard, and the like. The floor needs sweeping, used syringes, crack vials, charred spoons, pipe stems. There are also many little tubes about thumb-sized, transparent plastic with a red cap on one end. They might be crack vials, but the caps are still on them. And pipeheads wouldn't be so fastidious as to replace the lid on an empty vial. It must be something Hero hasn't heard of before. The McDonald's styrofoam burger box of drug containers. That's what the hypercard comes in. It's interesting that we talk about intertextuality and how these books interrelate with one another, right? And how we just talked about the etymology of the word disaster in King Lear. I couldn't believe this came up. And here it is on page 128. Disaster is an astrological term meaning bad star, from the stars, or bad star, dis, right? And astra, ad astra per aspera. The librarian points out, sorry, but due to my internal structure, I'm a sucker for non sequiturs. We have the description of the CIA and the feds as gargoyles on page 147. Page 174 is interesting because it talks about the rise of the Mexican mafia. And, oh, sure, it says the narcolombians still have a lock on coca leaves, but now that Nippon Pharmaceuticals, because it's like East Asia, West Asia, right? And the Nippon is like the Japanese. Remember in 1992, everybody thought the Japanese were taking over the world, right? Has its big cocaine synthesis facility in Mexicali nearly complete that will cease to be a factor. The mafia is betting that any smart youngster going into the business these days will take note of these billboards and think twice. We have Fedland and the feds. Feds have a fetish for loyalty since they don't make a lot of money or get a lot of respect. You don't have to prove you're personally committed, that you don't care about those trappings. Of course, it says, the feds are always staring down the barrel of a telephoto lens, shotgun microphone, or sniper rifle. The longer, the better. And, of course, all that stuff on page 209 is like boomer, normie, self-mythology about the feds. Oh, they do it for the duty. No, they do it because, well, I can't get into that. Let's see. We have images and symbolism of baptism and rebirth on page 312, except it is into the Wayne dude's cult. It says, my system crashed. I saw static, and then I became very sick. I went to the hospital, and there in the hospital, I met a man who explained everything to me. He explained that I had been washed in the blood, that I belonged to the Word now, and suddenly it all made sense. And then I decided to go to the raft. The raft is like the arc that the orthos in the book ride, right? And then it says, it's pretty revelatory, then it says, the woman pushes up one sleeve of a raggedy sweatshirt to expose a needle-pocked arm. You took drugs? No, we gave blood. They sucked your blood out? This ties in with the fact that the elite are trafficking in BLOOD and PIZZA. Yes, sometimes we would do a little coding, but only some of us. How long have you been here? I don't know. They move us here when our veins don't work anymore. We just do things to help spread the word, drag stuff around, make barricades. We don't really spend much time working. Most of the time we sing songs, pray, and tell other people about the word. But you see that this is an inversion because this is like the 21st century globalist, strip mall Pastor Randy Ball's version of a religion in the minds of these like computer techno normies who are simply playing into the victimhood of being trafficked for their BLOOD and PIZZA so that they can have their minds wiped and be depopped by the villain, Bob Reif, right? How the virus, the VIRUS spreads is vampirical. It says, in the infrared, she can see that the third Philabala, the one who came up here with the high priest, is holding a small thing in one hand that is unusually warm. She nails him with her pen light, spotlighting his upper body in a narrow yellow beam. Most of him is dirty and dun-colored and reflects little light, but there is a brilliant glossy red thing, a shaft of ruby. It's a hypodermic needle. It's full of red fluid under infrared. It shows up warm. It's fresh blood. On the Enterprise, they take their blood, heroes, suck it out of their bodies. They infect people by injecting them with the blood of sick hackers. And when their veins get all tracked out like junkies, they cut them loose and put them to work on the mainland running the wholesale operation. It's page 315. And then she says her mother is a programmer for the feds. Kabbalah and Gnosticism play a major role in this book because Hero says that he says that he believes in God. And he says he believes in Christ, which I'm like, when I was reading, I was like, oh, thank goodness, based. And then I immediately went, the next thing he said, I went, oh, cringe. Because he says, man, I believe in Christ, but not the Christ they always told you about, man. I hate to say that in a sarcastic manner. I mean, I don't, it's serious subject matter, so I shouldn't be sarcastic about it. But because it's a serious thing. I mean, what he's saying here is so true of all of these people, right? It's that, oh, they don't believe in God. They believe in, in the book, they're like, oh man, the Bible was written by a man, and and it's just a rehashing of events that were already told in Gilgamesh. I mean, they constantly bring up Gilgamesh and Enkidu in the book, and the Sumerians and the Babylonians, because they're trying to say that language, they're going back to the oldest thing, right, or the so-called oldest thing, and saying, oh no, man, language is a virus, and that's pure William Burroughs, right? Language virus, and that only points towards what they're playing into, which is Depop. It says here, the Kabbalists, the mystics of Spain and Palestine believed that, on page, this is 326, that supernormal insight and power could be derived from properly combining the letters of the divine name. For example, of course, man, all this shit that we already know about, right? It says, most Kabbalists were theorists who were interested only in pure meditation, but they were so-called practical Kabbalists who tried to apply the power of the Kabbalah to everyday life. In other words, sorcerers, right? Speak and spell. Yes, these practical Kabbalists used a so-called archangelic alphabet derived from the first century Greek and Aramaic language alphabets, which resembled cuneiform. The Kabbalists referred to this alphabet as I writing, Illuminate confirm, because the letters were composed of lines and small circles which resembled eyes. which is where he says the origin of binary code comes from. Do you get how his ideas about tech for the future, because I'm going to wrap it up here now, because what this is saying here, tying back into my thesis statement at the beginning, is that the future and now and the tech world is essentially the transhumanist Gnostic world of binary, where of a dualistic system where you can transcend the bounds of your capital R reality in this book by hooking into the metaverse, and that becomes your real world, your new real world, because the villain is trying to create a Gnostic Neo-Eden in his image, just like, remember in the new Bond movie, the guy's doing the same thing. The iRobot guy, who's the villain in the new Bond movie, right, wants to depop the world through a VIRUS so that he can create a new Luciferian Eden in his own image as a sort of a demiurge character. And that is exactly what the guy in this book is doing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing again. I just think it's more revelatory in this book because this is a manual for the way that they've made things. They have a priest class called the Infocrats. I thought it was cool that they brought up Raven, by the way, is a Russian, and they brought up and he wants to bring down the system, but they page 411, they bring up Moby Dick. We've covered Moby Dick here, right? And this says, nah, compared to me, those Moby Dicksters were FAGGOTS because he's a harpoonist. And the poon, POON, is the name for basically when they like they carjack and they hitch rides on vehicles because it's with the harpoon. Let's see. Pages 418 and 419 talk about the metaverse and binary code and how the metaverse is wide open, undefended, and they put the bitmap onto scrolls and gave the scrolls to avatars who went around the metaverse looking for victims. They're on scrolls because they have this pseudo-religious trappings, right, in order to lure people into this sort of cult, which is just going to depop them. Do you get it? I mean, because it's like, no, he's not going to, I mean, he could just, if he's going to be religious, if he's going to have if he's going to have any sort of grounding, if he has any, there's no like virtue in the book. If he has any virtue or anything beyond the immediate sense data of his sort of, Nietzsche world, because the binary code is like being in nothingness, right? Then why doesn't he just go, well, for one, he should probably just, in the book, he should just go to Russia, right? He should just go to Russia and, and actually, worship the Trinity, right? Worship the Trinity instead of, worshiping himself and trying to transcend the bounds of reality through this metaverse. It says, let's see, that goes on to talk about how he created the thing I'll say this is the last point because this was pretty revelatory. The bad guy, first of all, Rife is on page 512, but it's terrible. Rife is the Antichrist. So he's the he's the Antichrist figure, and in the world of Snow Crash, he is like literally the Antichrist in the book. Because, world domination through tech, depopulation, all this stuff. But one thing I found interesting about the motivations for Raven, it was pretty interesting. He brought up a good point, was that, so Raven wants revenge because his father was nuked. There's a lot about Vietnam in the book, but, so it's kind of a boomer-esque way of looking at things. Generation X looking at boomers. And then, anyway, Raven wants revenge. He wants to avenge the fact that his father was nuked by the then United States, right? And And Hiro says his own dad was in Nagasaki when it was nuked. And he says, well, it's the United States that, is the only one that's used the nuke. And Raven brings up a good point. He says, not true. The only times they used the nuke was not Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Anybody who lived anywhere where they did nuke testing was nuked. And it turns out that his dad was not only nuked in Nagasaki and survived, but he was in Aleutian. He went to the Aleutian Islands, and then he was nuked again, right? When they did the nuke testing. So of course he wants to get his hands on an H bomb so he can destroy it. He was nuked twice, once at Nagasaki when he was blinded, and then again in 1972 when the Americans nuked our homeland. The Americans fucking nuked us, he says. But every nuclear power has one aboriginal group whose territory they nuke to test their weapons. I thought that was pretty interesting. Of course, then it talks about the informational entity known as the metavirus. Rife is the Antichrist. There's Rife Bible College. Rife's Black Cube is there. Rife lives in the Black Cube, which is a cube, spheres, tetrahedrons, and polyhedrons, cylinders, lines, and helices. It's like black rock, right? And another thing on just interesting little things on page 531, all vehicles in the metaverse have voice phones on them. So everybody's always on their smartphone. There's one part where it doesn't mention the iPhone by name, but it is interesting because iPhone, remember the original design for the iPhone, right? Or for the iPod. It doesn't have an off button, right? It's a wheel, and it's supposed to mimic the ones and the zeros of binary code. And then he says everybody basically pulls up their device to talk on their phone, which is a black rectangle where there's a mirror that pops up. So it's an iPhone. So did they nuke the Aleutian Islands? I mean, they nuked the Bikini Atoll. Remember they nuked. Remember when they nuked Mississippi? What was it? It was Project Salmon, I think it was called, something like that. They set off a nuclear weapon in a salt mine in Mississippi. You remember that? We weren't alive when that happened, but it was in Mississippi. They put a nuke in an underground salt mine. And also, I think I told the story one time before about how they were doing. They were setting off nukes they were testing them in the Nevada desert, and Howard Hughes called up Nixon and said, you need to delay this testing because you're shaking my bed, right? They were shaking his bed in his Kleenex sterile coon pod up in Vegas. So he called Nixon on the phone and said, if you set off one more thing, I'm going to, I forget what he was going to. He said he was going to withhold the Glomar Explorer project. And that's kind of like, remember when the government tried to do that to Aristotle, they were trying to blackmail Aristotle Onassis, and Onassis said, if you do that, I'm going to hold all of this salt. Speaking of salt, Aristotle Onassis controlled the bulk of salt importation in the United States and said there's not going to be any more salt in the country if you do that. And they withheld it. Exactly, Tamara. Yes, that's what was rattling. In that book that I have up there, Howard Hughes' Life and Madness, great book. Probably the best book about Howard Hughes. I mentioned this before one time, I think. He used only Mormons, right, to be his workers and his sort of henchmen. And one of them was that guy, Bob, I forget his name, Bob, whatever, Mayhew. Bob Mayhew, who was a CIA-fed, wet works contractor, who did black bag operations for Howard Hughes, and he was the only person who was allowed personal contact with Howard Hughes. And Hughes always communicated through memos, so he didn't obviously keep a diary or write memoirs. We have his memos. He fired off strongly worded letters all the time in his memos. But whenever any of his minions would come up, they had and give him a piece of paper they never handed it to him directly. They had to hand it to another person who handed it to another person who handed it to another person. It was a cellular structure who then handed it to like Mayhew. And when he handed it to him, he went into his room, which was like a 2001 Space Odyssey Moonchild, pristine, sterile room. And they had to hand him the pieces of paper in between, like 322 stacks of Kleenex. And that he wore Kleenex boxes on his feet instead of shoes. Which is pretty what? Anyway, so I hope you guys like that. Let's check, see if we got any super chats here. Thank you to everybody who is chilling with me tonight. I love y'all. Thank you for being here late night. We do a little late night stream. We do a little late night streaming. Yo, shouts out to Jack for that $5. Jack sends me $5 for the Norm references. Thank you. Appreciate you, and I'm glad somebody out there gets my my Norm jokes, my Norm MacDonald jokes and humor. Also, shouts out to Jack who super chatted me $10 the other day and thanked me for streams. I really appreciate you, homeboy. Thank you for supporting me always. I really appreciate you. So thank you for that. Let's see. We've got a $5 donation from Alan McIntyre. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that PayPal. That donation, really, thank you so much. Shouts out to Stephen Mulroney, our homeboy, OG Kang. Stephen Mulroney, who donates $5 on PayPal. Really appreciate you, homeboy. Thank you so much. And listen, y'all, thank you for being here with me again for all my babbling. I didn't even get into the idea of babble in the text. There's so much. I mean, look at so much in this book. Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. So hopefully you found that, entertaining, I guess, at least. Maybe you got something out of it. And you see that it was a manual for the world now. Also, next stream I'll be doing will, of course, be, I'm going to get on this one right away because it's for our homeboy Jethro, who did a stream sponsorship because he's our homeboy out there. We love him. And that is No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. Of course, we've done Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. If you haven't seen that, that's one of my favorite ones that we did, Blood Meridian. And if you would like to sponsor a stream, you gotta send some fat kongbucks in here. Okay, I'm talking 100 bones. Send me some fat kongbucks, and I will give you my time, energy, and I will try to do a based analysis of work as long as it's one that I think is appropriate for here. And of course we have, if you want to see me do a analysis of some music, we've had a bunch of those come in, and send me $10-20, and I will do whatever songs or band you want me to do. And we'll be continuing that soon. Also, we're going to be doing, sometime in the future, when we get through this, we'll be doing another stream with our homeboy Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies, who's going to do an analysis of, I think he's doing one on his own because he knows all about J.R.R. Tolkien, right? The Midnight Toker, Tolkien. And I'll probably be rereading The Hobbit. Why not? Just so I can sort of refresh myself to do that stream because I'm going to be applying it to the lyrics of Led Zeppelin. I'll be talking about Ramble On, Battle of Evermore, etc., and the influence of Tolkien on Robert Plant and the lyrics of Led Zeppelin. And what else? And we'll be doing the Jethro stream on No Country for Old Men, Portrait in Your Pocket. And what's the other movie we're doing? I'm definitely going to include Burn After Reading in that. And it's not about whether I like or dislike the film. I think it's a film that's, there's a lot to be gleaned from that film, especially about intelligence ties and the nihilistic, nothing happens world of the stupid fucking movie. But it'll be enjoyable. It'll be enjoyable to do that. And maybe we can come up with another Coen Brothers movie to do. We were thinking about doing Hail Caesar. I'm not sure I want to do that. I mean, we did just cover Trumbo, right? And Dalton Trumbo, who wrote Johnny Got Your Gun, and who is not by name in the character Hail Caesar, but he's obviously one of the writers, one of the communist writers in the movie. He's the guy with the glasses and the mustache. because he was part of that circle that kidnaps George Clooney in the movie. So if you've got an idea of another Coen Brothers movie you want me to do, probably not Big Lebowski. I don't really want to analyze Big Lebowski. It's kind of impervious to analysis for me. So if you got another one of those, send me a super chat. Also, what else will we be doing soon? We'll be doing the postmodern novel White Noise by Don DeLeo, and a whole bunch of course, we're going to continue our Shakespeare streams. Next Shakespeare I'll probably do will be The Tempest, because I've been talking about it for a while, and then we will probably do some of the more of the Henriade trilogy or some of the histories. We've done a lot of Shakespeare here, and we're going to continue to do that because it's the foundation of the canon of British literature. So I think that would be good to do. So that's about all I got tonight for y'all. Hope you enjoyed this little live stream, a little late streaming. Hope everybody has a wonderful Saturday. I'm gonna try to recover from this tooth operation, and thank you all for being with me here. I appreciate you all, and I will see you on the flip, as Burma says. Burmas, Burmas. So I will see y'all. I love you. Stay frosty out there, cold ass riders. All right, I'm just babbling now. I love y'all. I will see you later. All right. Peace, everybody. Peace.